When it comes to things that crashed and burned in 2001, obviously the first thing that comes to my mind is the kids movie franchise Spy Kids. It started out iconic enough to define a generation, but it imploded so spectacularly that nowadays the only things anyone can remember are its low points. And there are many, many low points. Hi, I'm D'Angelo, and at this point, introducing myself would be like introducing Beyonce. Everybody already knows that my face card never declines, and also I've won 32 Grammys. Anyway, I'm glad you're here, because today we have ourselves a cautionary tale of what happens when you milk a franchise to death. Spy Kids went from one of the strongest starts in movie history to being so bad that it's been relentlessly memed everywhere from TikTok to YouTube for nearly as long as the modern internet has existed. And speaking of which, how old were you in 2001? Whether you're like me and you watched the movie so many times that you had them memorized, or whether it was before your time and you've never seen a single clip, today we're all about to witness one of the most disappointing downfalls in the world of film. From special effects nightmare fuel to increasingly problematic storylines, the original Spy Kids trilogy fell from a beloved first film to a shockingly bad ending that is hands down one of the worst movies I have ever seen. Reviews got worse with every film in the franchise, proving that just because something is a good idea doesn't mean it needs to happen 5 times, or 12. Or 33. But that's beside the point. Now, many have seen the movies and we've all seen the memes, but I wanted to see the mess. See, Spy Kids is a time capsule of everything wrong with the 2000s, and I decided to blow the lid off this capsule, like Pandora's box of poorly aged madness. We're gonna watch the original trilogy together, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. I found everything for this video, from cursed comics to obscure video games that were probably forgotten for a reason. And as I scoured the web, suffering through multiple migraines and wild goose chases, I saw the world back then turning on Spy Kids in real time. And today we get to join in on the experience, because what could be more fun than watching something you love go to complete and utter hell? As my childhood memories gave way to a cinematic catastrophe, I descended into what can only be described as Spy Kids purgatory. And now I'm here to drag you down with me into the good, the bad, and the ugly CGI. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of fun to be had, but before we get into that, let's get into today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Grammarly. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. The holy trinity of things that I'm fine with not doing, honestly. Reading and arithmetic still happen to me occasionally, but writing is the one I've never been able to escape. First, I wrote never-ending essays for school. Now I write YouTube videos that never end. Not much has changed, except nowadays, I don't have to write alone. Grammarly is the AI writing partner that helps you write better, faster. Here are some great features that are just a click away. Grammarly helps you ideate. Sometimes the biggest hurdle is the blank page, but thanks to Grammarly, getting started has never been easier. Grammarly helps you reply. Summarizing incoming messages and helping you draft responses lets you clear your inbox faster than ever. Grammarly helps you revise. You can go from first draft to final draft with confidence using Grammarly to analyze your work's tone and clarity. Grammarly does not allow third parties to use your writing for AI training, so you're in complete control of your privacy. To explore all the ways that Grammarly can help you improve your writing from start to finish, you can sign up and download Grammarly for free today at grammarly.com/Wallace05. Again, you can try all these great features for free. That's grammarly.com/Wallace05. Now let's get into the video. Alright, so Spy Kids 1. This wasn't just a movie, it was a moment. And looking back, it's easy to see why, because 2001 had really weird energy. Now, I was only 2.5, no men, because that hadn't come out yet, so obviously my memory of 2001 is photographic down to the last detail. But for those of you who don't remember, here's the deal. We were obsessed with 2 things, technology and trying to look cool. Some of this worked, but a lot of it did not. So the same year that gave us a lot of really fun and cool stuff, like the iPod and the Xbox and the GameCube, also gave us a major economic recession, which financially speaking was neither fun nor cool. It was really sad, like, you know, when your Tamagotchi dies, but instead of a virtual pet, it's the entire US economy. Like the dot-com bubble had burst, meaning a bunch of tech companies were going under, but we were also getting all these rapid advancements at the same time. Technology was basically popping off and falling off simultaneously, and that left us with a sense of optimistic paranoia. I mean, the Y2K incident was still fresh in our memory, where people thought that the world would fall into chaos and confusion because computers couldn't count past 1999, which, thinking back, is so silly. I mean, come on. Millions of computers going offline at the same time all over the world. When would that ever happen? Point is, despite the wins, a lot of stuff from this era was really goofy in retrospect. Even though the year spawned many things that we still use offshoots or iterations of to this day, some things from 2001 were just not meant to last, no matter how high they peaked. Popped collars, low-rise jeans, 1 or 2 other things, and that brings us to Spy Kids. What better way to epitomize the pursuit of technology and trying to look cool than than a spy movie. Based off the general vibe on the time, you can see why a high-tech, gadget-focused movie with a couple of too cool for school tweens where technology is both the good guy and the bad guy would do well at the time. But what about now? Has it stood the test of time, or did it age like milk? There's really only one way to find out, so put on your spy glasses because we're about to watch Spy Kids 1. Even though the spy glasses meme is actually from Spy Kids 2, but that's a spoiler. Alright, so first things first, the opening goes hard. Anyway, we cut right to the chase, introducing our main sibling duo, Carmen and Junie.
Did you, brush?
I already did.
Junie, don't forget to...
I am.
You would never catch me interrupting my mother like that because she would have banished me to the Shadow Realm. Anyway, both kids have their own issues to worry about, with Junie dealing with warts related to his anxiety and Carmen dealing with something that she doesn't want her mom to know about.
Everything okay at school?
Yeah.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine.
Like, Carmen is very clearly going through it, but the mom's just like,
Okay.
so they're getting ready for bed, but not before they get a bedtime story. Which, by the way, I miss bedtime stories. My parents used to read me like Goodnight Moon and The Very Hungry Caterpillar, but nowadays the only thing I read before bed is articles about how the world is ending. And the worst part is they don't even have cool pictures. Anyway, their mom tells Carmen and Junie the story of the two spies who fell in love.
He was the assignment that changed her life.
So as we, the audience, learn, Carmen and Junie's parents were the spies in question, and they were apparently great at their job of being undercover spies, because there's nothing more inconspicuous than an oversized trench coat. Also, good time to note that the parents in this movie are played by Antonio Banderas and Carla Gugino, and bruh, they took the phrase two pretty best friends personally.
Is somebody gonna match my freak? Is somebody gonna match my freak?
I'm sorry, but it's almost comical how good they look. I think the only thing the parents do in this movie is just serve looks for an hour and a half straight. And as a kid, I had no idea that I would grow up to do the very same thing. Anyway, it's a tale as old as time. They were on a mission to kill each other, they wound up falling in love, and they decided to start a family together instead, leaving the secret agent life behind them. You know, the same way all of our parents met.
They decided to marry.
Now, even though it's so obvious that this bedtime story is a barely redacted true account of their parents' backstory, Carmen and Junie don't realize this because little kids are about dumb as hell.
Great story, Mom, but it needs a new ending. It needs monsters.
But it turns out there's actually one caveat with this bedtime story. The mom and dad haven't gotten over their spy life at all. They still have all their spy gear, but they keep it a secret from the kids, but they haven't been on a mission since the kids were born. And they don't just keep secrets, they see through them too. All the info that Carmen and Junie were trying to hide, it looks like the parents already know.
Carmen's been skipping school twice a month.
And Junie gets picked on by the kids at school.
He has no friends.
Also, the dad's reaction to hearing that his son has no friends is so funny because he's like, well, can't say I'm surprised. He's just a weird kid.
Doesn't help that he has his head in the clouds, making these weird drawings,
He's like, of course our son has no friends. He's an iPad kid.
burying himself into that demented kids show.
No, but jokes aside, one thing's for sure, the family does care about each other a whole lot, but they have a big problem when it comes to keeping secrets.
What are you working on over here?
Nothing.
So Carmen and Junie have just been living a normal life, except for the odd thing here or there, like the giant indoor obstacle course that they run drills through every morning. And it's on this course that we see Carmen and Junie's relationship is a little bit strained.
Butterfingers.
Wow, this is literally so me when I try to murder my siblings. I mean, to be fair, they're not actually trying to murder each other, they're just siblings. So as the kids get ready for school, we find out that an agent from the parent spy organization has mysteriously disappeared.
Is this what you were hiding from me last night?
I didn't want to worry you.
And you know that demented kids show the dad worries about Junie watching? Well, it turns out that one of the new characters on that show looks a whole lot like the missing agent, but he's been somewhat changed. Kids movies, am I right? Just a little bit of transmogrification. Like, why is this so horrifying? Anyway, the kids are dropped off at school and Junie overhears Carmen venting about her frustrations as an older sister.
Watch out for Junie. Take care of Junie. Show Junie right from wrong. I shouldn't be responsible for anybody but me.
Honestly, period. I'm just going to be upfront. Carmen is going to say a lot of problematic things in this movie, and I am going to agree with every single one of them. As somebody with multiple younger siblings, I am a Carmen Cortez apologist.
You're so right, Carmen.
But I do feel bad for Junie though, because oof. Meanwhile, it turns out that that weird show he watches is actually run by an evil genius who's being paid unfathomable amounts of money to develop an army of villains. But they've run into a few hiccups.
Our first $1 billion bought us only this: mutated secret agents.
And these mutated secret agents have lost all of their cognitive functions due to the horrifying transformation, and they're now being held captive and forced to perform as extras in the Bad Guys Hit children's series. But at least the show's doing well.
Currently rated number two.
number 2.
So yeah, I guess the first psychological body horror film that I ever watched was actually Spy Kids when I was 4. But the mutated agents aren't the only thing the bad guy's been spending the money on.
They're called Thums. Very capable robots.
The bad guy's not very good at being bad, but he's got one more trick up his sleeve.
He's my son.
Are you sure? Actually, I designed him.
An army of robot children that look like other people's children.
His name is X52495.
There's only one problem with these kids, a key component that they're missing.
Their brains. They're not quite finished.
Yeah, he's a deeply unserious person. Also, his name is Fegan Floop, which kind of sounds like a slur. Anyway, back at home, the dad's like, yeah, I gotta save the missing agents. And the mom's like, yeah, take me with you. And the dad's like, yeah. No. But then she raises him up and this man folds like a napkin. He's like, you know what? I am once again in the proper headspace to match your freak. So they invite the kid's Uncle Felix over to babysit and then they drive off a cliff into the ocean. But thankfully their SUV is a submarine, obviously. But then they're immediately captured by the bad guy. So the parents trigger a red alert back home, which causes the kid's Uncle Felix to reveal a small secret of his own.
I'm not your uncle.
He explains to the kids that he's actually a secret agent assigned to protect them, and he tells them that their parents are secret agents as well, to which Carmen delivers the unforgettable line,
My parents can't be spies. They're not cool enough.
She really just spends this entire movie just dragging any and everyone. Like, y'all don't understand. Carmen does not play around.
We can't leave Felix behind. Oh, yes, we can.
She said, bye, Felix. Nice knowing you. And you know, even though she does make fun of her brother and prey upon his insecurities in the way that only a sibling can, she really does care about him. I think that's part of why this movie works so well. See, they've just had their world turned upside down. They've just been chased out of their own home by the world's dumbest killer robots. And Junie is understandably freaking out. But Carmen also has the sibling power of knowing exactly how to make her brother feel better.
We're gonna be fine. Just be cool and do exactly as I say.
That's the thing. These kids aren't always nice to each other, but they're always there for each other. And I think the movie manages to portray that relationship really well. They're both just doing the best they can, and it's really sweet, except for the part where their parents have been kidnapped.
We're never gonna see him again, are we?
You're not really fine, but you just can't get into it.
One nitpick, though, that I do have with the Cortez siblings is that they are so privileged.
That's a safe house?
Looks more like an outhouse.
Why you gotta drag the safe house? It's doing its best. Sorry, it's not a cliffside mansion with an ocean view like your parents' house. Jeez. So inside the safe house, the kids find everything they need. Jetpacks.
Machete's buddy pack.
Thousands of dollars in unmarked bills.
I think we better take all of that.
Shameless McDonald's product placement. It's everything a kid could want. Meanwhile, in Floop's castle / illegal experimentation facility, the mom and dad try to escape only to wind up right back in Floop's clutches.
I snap my fingers, and my fingers snap you.
See, Floop until this point has been a pretty goofy guy, but that's all about to change. Remember fake Uncle Felix? Well, Floop has captured him, and he mutates him on the spot just to show the parents that he means business. And why is he so obsessed with the parents? Well, it turns out that the dad was involved in developing the very robot brain that Floop needs to complete his creepy robot children. And he stored the brain in question in the very same safe house where the kids are trying out their cool new spy toys.
Ew, gross.
What do you see?
You.
While they're there, the kids learn that Floop is a bad guy, and of course the mutation body horror theme gets even creepier. They play the theme song to Floop's show backwards, and listen.
We're trapped! Floop is a madman, help us, save us! Floop is a madman, help us, save us!
So you're telling me that not only are the mutated agents doomed to live out their days as unholy abominations, but they're also constantly crying for help, but nobody can understand them because they've lost their ability to communicate with other humans. Why is this movie going so hard? I was 4. You could have just said, oh, the agents are really sad to be captured, and I would have been like, oh no, we have to save them. You did not have to do all of this. I think this movie is legit scarier to me now than it was when I was a kid. Anyway, Floop's lackeys show up to retrieve the brain, or so they think, but Carmen and Junie fight back, now armed with their seemingly endless supply of high-tech gadgets.
You don't even know what those things are.
I know they're heavy.
They take the brain back and we have a high-speed jetpack chase because of course we have a high-speed jetpack chase. I feel like the 2000s was kind of just our jetpack era. Like why were we all so obsessed with jetpacks? Anyway, Junie almost has a Gwen Stacy moment, except he actually survives. And then they get the drippiest clothes they can find so they can throw the bad guys off their game.
360, when you're in the mirror, see what you see. When you're in the mirror, you're just looking at me.
Never underestimate the power of good drip. Now, back at Floop's castle, we see that the world domination and unstoppable army thing isn't really his passion. What he really wants to do is work on his TV show.
My show! It needs something. That thing that will take it to #1.
I suggest breaking up. Like a well-timed breakup video will do numbers. Get in a little PR relationship, act like you love each other, then collaborate, call it off, and cash out.
Yes, I did that. And you would do it too for a check.
But Floop's minion, whose name is Minion, is like, come on, forget the show. We should be taking over the entire world.
Floop, you're spending too much time on this program when you should be more concerned with our grand diabolical plan.
I wonder which one of them will turn out to be the true villain, I said in a tone that indicated I already knew the answer. So at Minion the Minion's suggestion, they send a pair of robot children to fight Carmen and Junie. And you'll never guess who these robots are based on. We've got evil robot Carmen and evil robot Junie, which to this day, I think is a really fun plot point. So the kids get completely mogged by their own robot counterpoints, which is low-key crazy when you think about it, and the robots retrieve the brain again. And this time, Carmen and Junie aren't getting it back, so it's time to enlist some help. Now, all of the gadgets they've been using up until now have been manufactured by Machete, who actually turns out to be their uncle. Their real uncle, not like fake Uncle Felix, who's been genetically altered into an accursed monster. And their uncle Machete is a genius inventor.
World's smallest camera.
I don't see it.
But it sees you.
It's funny because nowadays, 20 years in the future, camera lenses are actually small enough to fit on your fingertip because they have to fit inside of our phone. So Machete was truly ahead of his time. Also, Minion the Minion is the real villain.
The mutated agents, the robot kids, those aren't my ideas, they're yours.
Didn't see that one coming. Minion has the robot kids lock Floop up and he decides to handle things himself. Back at Machete's lab, the kids are asking for help, but Machete's refusing because apparently he and his brother have some beef. And Carmen finds this all too familiar.
Watch out for Gregorio. Take care of Gregorio. Make sure Gregorio knows right from wrong. Not anymore.
Hearing the words come from someone else's mouth makes Carmen realize that, like, they're kind of sad.
Machete's not responsible for nobody but Machete.
But that's not what family is.
And look, I know this is just a kid's movie, but I actually think prioritizing your own happiness over that of your family is completely fine. Like, unless you're actually responsible for them, as in you're their parent or guardian, I really don't think anyone should be held accountable for anyone else's well-being. It's hard enough being well on your own, but nevertheless, it is a wholesome sentiment. Anyway, Junie and Carmen realize that their uncle is not going to help no matter what, so they take matters into their own hands, and we get this absolute banger of a line.
Never sent an adult to do a kid's job.
So they go up to the roof and steal Machete's experimental superplane. That way they can fly off to Floop's castle and save their parents. I'm gonna be honest, when I first saw that explosion, I literally thought they died. Anyway, Carmen and Junie make it to Floop's castle, but things are getting kind of dicey because Floop is already upgrading the army of robot children with mass-produced copies of the brain, but our spy kids are not to be dissuaded. They're tearing through the castle halls using every Machete gadget at their disposal. Electric chewing gum, electric bubbles, world's tiniest cameras. It's all going really well right up until they get caught by the robot children, who we now find out can talk, and what is hands down the creepiest scene in this entire movie. No, absolutely not. Children should never say anything in unison. It is literally always creepy. So the kids split up and Carmen winds up in the Thumb Robot Production Center where there is a supposedly hot nurse Thumbot, which is nothing short of horrifying. Junie, on the other hand, makes his way to rescue Floop, who offers to help him, but only if Junie will serve as an impromptu focus group for his TV show. This man is obsessed with his TV show, but luckily Junie knows exactly what the show was missing.
It needs children.
The two of them reunite with Carmen, but it's too late. The dad has already been turned.
It's Dad.
Specifically turned into a character from one of Junie's weird drawings. It's like each new development with the mutated agents is more horrible than the last. Anyway, the last 13 minutes of the movie move very quickly, so here's a crash course. Everyone comes clean with their secrets. It's revealed that Carmen was skipping school because she just wanted some time to herself.
Is that what you want to be? Free from your family?
Not anymore.
Everyone who is mutated gets turned back because, you know, it is a kid's movie. Except for the bad guy, who gets a taste of his own medicine.
I think it's reversible.
Thanks, I hate it. So evil robot Carmen shows up and starts monologuing like an anime villain.
Poor little Junie. Defenseless and weak.
But the real Carmen stands up for her brother proudly this time.
You're strong, Junie! You're strong! You're not that strong, Junie!
Carmen and Junie narrowly escape their evil twins, but not for long. The army of robot children is on their way, and there's only 4 people to stop them. But then Machete came through after all. So now the army of robot children is on their way and there's only 5 people to stop them. This entire family is about to get wiped out by demonic AI babies. But then Floop reprograms the robot children to be good instead of evil, and they take out Minion and the bad guys who were bankrolling him instead. And it turns out that the dad doesn't even remember why he and Machete were beefing in the first place.
Neither do I.
It's okay.
The family agrees that they won't keep any more secrets. The robot children have become forces for good, and that's basically it. Except for when George Clooney shows up at the end for like 3 seconds and tries to get them to go on another mission.
This assignment is for Carmen and Junie. They're the ones we need.
And Carmen and Junie are like, yeah, no.
Whatever we do together. And that's the mission worth fighting for.
And that's the end. Cue the annoying end credits theme song. God, it's so bad. So as you can see, Spy Kids is just a really fun movie, okay? It's got a ton of funny moments, a lot of heart, and some themes that have seriously stood the test of time. But how did the movie perform? See, lots of great films have middling box office performance during their time, and they're only seen as pop culture staples after the fact, like Treasure Planet, The Iron Giant, and the cinematic masterpiece known as The Boss Baby. That last one, of course, is a joke because The Boss Baby actually made $500 million. But Spy Kids had the coveted privilege of being both a massive financial success and a widely appreciated film among viewers and critics alike from the very moment it was released. The film made a whopping $147 million from the box office in 2001. And seeing as how the budget was only $35 million, Spy Kids was a smash hit in every sense of the word. And people loved it. Now, the internet has been opining on this film for like 20 years straight. And if I had to review it, I'd say it's a beautiful movie that has aged really well and portrays a really nuanced and realistic view of multiple family dynamics, while packing in enough action and imagination to appeal to kids and their parents. I mean, I'm neither a kid nor a parent, and I think this movie was awesome. But I want to know how people at the time felt. So let's boot up the Wayback Machine and check in with the critics from 2001. So Roger Ebert, one of the most iconic film critics of all time, gave the film a 3.5 out of 4. For context, Roger Ebert was not just massively popular, but widely influential, and a co-sign with his name on it went a long way in the 2000s. And this was no mere pat on the back. Movies like Spy Kids are so rare. It's an intelligent, upbeat, happy movie that is not about the comedy of embarrassment, that does not have anybody rolling around in dog poop, that would rather find out what it can accomplish than what it can get away with. It's a treasure. I have to agree with this one, especially the word intelligent. I think kids movies have a tendency to either only appeal to children by doing things that nobody over the age of 13 would find funny, or they take the opposite approach and try to cram in so many adult jokes into one film that you almost wonder why it's a kids movie in the first place. But Spy Kids really does feel like the perfect middle ground, which is not an easy balance to strike. Anyway, Ebert was far from the only critic to appreciate the more nuanced approach that the movie took. The Chicago Tribune highlighted the movie's inventiveness and flair, comparing it to older classics like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I think this is actually a really good comparison. In fact, the director of Spy Kids said that he was massively inspired by Willy Wonka, and that Floop is actually based off of Wonka himself. And you know what? I can kind of see it. I think it would also explain some of the more fever dream-esque energy that Spy Kids tends to exude, but I think it had the perfect amount of weirdness to be charming, if not somewhat horrifying. Now, it is worth noting that not everyone who watched Spy Kids 1 had purely positive things to say. In LA Weekly's review, they still enjoyed the film, but they claim that the creator never quite strikes the right balance between the film's deeper themes and its action, but he gets close enough to make Spy Kids a decidedly worthwhile ride. I would have to agree that if you asked me to name like the deepest kids movies of all time, Spy Kids isn't exactly the first film that comes to mind, because obviously the deepest kids film of all time is The Boss Baby. But at the same time, I didn't really feel like Spy Kids was trying to be that deep, so I guess I'm not really one to hold that against it. But even while other reviews criticized the film for things like minor pacing issues, one thing was clear. In 2001, everybody loved Spy Kids, except for the people who didn't. Spy Kids saved the day, but the cover is blown off a clumsy, charmless story. So the Seattle Post-Intelligencer apparently did not get the hype. And you know what? Far be it from me, of all people, to dismiss criticism just because it's not fully positive, but I have to be honest, It's giving hater energy. Even if it makes the zillion dollars the studio expects, it's one lousy little movie, utterly devoid of any real originality or charm, and so loaded down with clumsy effects, it's an ordeal to sit through. Every step of the way, it feels like just what it is, a merchandising device. I feel like this is just totally unfair. Like, on the one hand, yes, the special effects are exceedingly silly, and they probably are the weakest point of the movie watching it nowadays, but as far as money being the only deciding factor behind the creation of Spy Kids, I just don't believe that. There are plenty of kids movies that do feel really cynical and calculated, but the first Spy Kids film has never felt like one of them to me. But yeah, some people really didn't get the appeal. The Washington Post also called the movie soulless, but like, I don't know. Maybe the lesson here is clear. Never send a grown-up to review a kid's movie. Unless, of course, that grown-up is me, because I'm right about everything. Now, obviously, we've got 2 more movies to watch, but I'm not quite ready to end my Spy Kids 1 journey just yet. I did not just come here to watch a few films that were created for people 10 to 20 years younger than me. I also came here to read a few books that were created for people 10 to 20 years younger than me. See, the world of Spy Kids isn't just limited to the silver screen, and I want the full Spy Kids experience. Thus began my frantic journey to find the largely forgotten literary classics that are the Spy Kids movie novelizations. I basically went on a Spy Kids mission of my own to find this full trilogy. My search began on Amazon.com, where I was immediately disappointed because I didn't find anything. Oh wait, yes I did. Oh wait, no I didn't, because it doesn't ship to the United States. It is not humanly possible to purchase the first book from Amazon, a website whose one job used to be selling books. So I tried looking for the second book instead, and it actually wound up being the first thing that I've ever looked up on the internet, only to find one result. Just one. I didn't even know that could happen. And the problem with that one result was the shipping time, because it wasn't going to get here fast enough. I knew that finding books that had been out of print for like 20 years was going to be no small task, but I was not to be discouraged. So I gave up on Amazon and continued my search on eBay, where I was immediately disappointed once again. It seems like nobody is in a hurry to sell these books because, again, they were there, but the shipping times were just not what I was looking for. Some of them did say they would get here in time, but sellers are just humans, and sometimes humans don't ship things in a timely fashion, or ever. But I had a video to make, so I took a leap of faith and I put in some orders. But then, due to my recent book buying experience, I realized my faith only goes so far, so I decided to buy the books again, just in case. But from where? My search for any copies of this book from literally anywhere led me to this one website I had never heard of before, and I said, you know what? Screw it. Add to cart. Then I got paranoid because I was like, wait, what if I just got scammed? Like I said, I had never heard of thriftbooks.com in my entire life, so I went back to Amazon. I was like, okay, I may not be able to purchase the entire trilogy because, again, the first book is just lost in the void, also known as the United Kingdom, but I could still purchase the one copy of the second book just as a backup option. And as it turned out, they had the third book as well. So between eBay, Amazon, and thriftbooks.com, which turned out not to be a scam, I now had multiple copies of Spy Kids coming to me from all over the country in the hopes that at least one of each would arrive in time for me to make the video you're watching now. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what happened. Except they actually all arrived. Every single copy that I purchased from all 3 websites. So that's fun. I guess I'll just donate the extras to my nearest free library. The hustler in me wanted to try to sell them myself, but seeing as they're worth like $2 on a good day, that might be a bit more trouble than it's worth. But yeah, I got the books. Are they even worth $2? There's only one way to find out. Now, obviously, the books for Spy Kids 2 and Spy Kids 3 are spoilers because we haven't watched those movies yet. So we're just gonna read Spy Kids, a novel based on the major motion picture. Espionage, intrigue, danger. Never send a grown-up to do a kid's job. Ha, they said the thing. All right, so right off the bat, I forgot that children's chapter books have like giant text, so I realized this book was going to be a whole lot shorter than I remembered. And yes, I do remember it. I first checked out this book from my local library when I was a kid, along with like Geronimo Stilton and Junie B. Jones. That was back before I started reading serious literature, like Little House on the Prairie. Anyway, I reread Spy Kids the novel, and I have to say, for a movie tie-in, it was surprisingly good. I think most novelizations of existing movies suffer from this one problem where they're completely pointless, but Spy Kids actually kind of adds something to the original. Like, take this passage on the first page, for example. It's a scene where Carmen and Junie are hanging out in their in-home jungle gym thing, and it goes like this. Junie looked down. The floor was a zillion feet below. His fingers started to slip. Here we go again, Junie thought miserably. My hands can never hold on tight enough. The parts with the sibling are written in third-person limited POV, so we get access to everything Junie's thinking, which is pretty charming. It makes the book feel less like a corporate retelling and more like a story shared from one kid to another. I think it adds just enough depth to be appreciated by a 5-year-old. They kind of flesh out the world a bit too, adding some extra scenes here, some extra context there. Like, I'm honestly somewhat surprised at the effort here. I mean, granted, there is a fair bit of expository dialogue that impacts the pacing, but when I was a kid, I don't even think I could pronounce the word expository, so I probably would not have cared. Also, side note, Floop's mutants are no less horrifying in text format. One Foogly had a blue head with scalloped edges. Another had a pointed lavender head. His mouth stretched sideways as if someone had stuffed a hanger inside. The Fooglies all had large, lumpy bodies too. Good old body horror for babies. But yeah, at the end of the day, the plot is identical to the movie, so there's not really too much to say, but you do get some fun extras. In the middle of the book, there are these glossy full-color photographs of the movie characters. They're actually really sweet pictures, mostly. And in the back, there's pretty much the coolest invitation of all time. Become an official Spy Kid. Now is your chance to be an official Spy Kid. Visit spykids.com to find out how you can save the world and win great prizes. I mean, how could anyone resist this? Kid or otherwise. Like, I'm turning 26 in a month and I'm going to spykids.com right now. Oh, just kidding. It's been lost forever. I'm actually kind of bummed about that. Guess I'll cheer myself up with Spy Kids 2. All right. So now it's 2002. But before we look at Spy Kids 2 as a movie, I am once again asking that we look at Spy Kids 2 as a situation. We've already seen the social trends of the time and how they fueled its pop culture dominance. But what about the mind behind the series? Who is responsible for our Spy Kids mania? Enter the director, Robert Rodriguez. The Spy Kids theme really does make everything sound cool. Anyway, Robert Rodriguez already had a notable film career, making decidedly not for kids movies, like Desperado and From Dusk Till Dawn, but his first foray into family films made more money than both of those movies combined. Spy Kids 2 was like a Machete buddy pack for his career, quickly skyrocketing to become his most successful film, and leaving kids and parents alike wondering where the heck this guy had come from. He seemed to wear many hats, both literally and figuratively. The man created Spy Kids, he wrote Spy Kids, directed Spy Kids. In fact, for Spy Kids 2, he also served as the production designer, cinematographer, editor, and he even co-wrote all of the music. He might as well have done the on-set catering too. Like, honestly, let him cook. This man single-handedly willed Spy Kids into existence, which is quite impressive, but I wanted to know more than what he did. I want to know who he is. And the quickest way to sum up Robert Rodriguez's life story is actually to sum up mine, because the similarities are kind of insane. So he grew up in San Antonio, Texas, right? And I grew up in San Antonio. His dad gave him a camera when he was 11. My dad gave me a camera when I was 7. It was a Sony Cybershot, and I mostly used it for serious things like taking pictures of ladybugs. In high school, he used to shoot football games until they dropped him because he was ahead of his time. And when I was a kid, I was the volunteer camera operator at our church. My parents thought it was because I was called to a life of service, but really I was just called to the even bigger Sony cameras that the church owned. And I haven't been to church in years because I was just so tired of being mistaken for Jesus. But I remember clear as day following the pastor around like, wow. This is such a good tracking shot. I too was ahead of my time. Anyway, Rodriguez completed his radio, television, film degree in 2008. I got my digital film and television degree in 2018, and the similarities just never end. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is all a remarkably specific coincidence, I'm here to tell you that it's not, because I was doing all of this on purpose, except for being raised in San Antonio. That kind of just happened. I didn't really have input there. I just rolled a 1 and they were like, great, you get to grow up in the southern United States. But the point is, I'm just going to admit it, I was a Robert Rodriguez stan. You know how Spy Kids gained him a bunch of child fans? I was one of them. Like, there's no two ways about it. I was a Robert Rodriguez head. I was part of the Robert Rodriguez hive. Like, whatever the modern day equivalent is, I was worse. I watched the Spy Kids movies as they came out because a theater visit used to be less than $45, and his name in the credits stood out to me because it was alliterative, so I decided then and there that he would be my idol forever. And listen, being a Robert Rodriguez fan as a 5-year-old was not easy because literally every film he released before Spy Kids was rated R, but I made it work. I watched the Spy Kids movies whenever I had free time, which as a child was very often. I learned his whole childhood backstory and all the lore, like back when his Wikipedia page was just a stump in 2003. I could have recited it from heart and I was literally in kindergarten. The short film that launched his career in 1991, I watched it before YouTube even existed. Basically, any media related to Robert Rodriguez that my mom wouldn't get mad at me for consuming, I ate it up. I cannot overstate how weird of a child I was. But yeah, if you're wondering what sort of impact the Spy Kids franchise had on kids at the time, Robert Rodriguez was literally my Mr. Beast. And speaking of beasts, it's time to watch the baffling fever dream that is Spy Kids 2: The Island of Lost Dreams. So this movie opens with the chilling screams and high-speed action of an amusement park.
We want to welcome a very special guest to our park today, the President's daughter.
Now, I'm no expert in international security, but something tells me that a televised announcement is maybe not the first thing you would want to allow if you're trying to protect the child of a world leader. But as it turns out, like all 10-year-olds, sometimes the biggest danger to the president's daughter is herself.
Where's your father?
He'll be here. I'll make sure of it.
So she asks the amusement park owner to point out the most thrilling ride in the park, which honestly just looks like a class action lawsuit waiting to happen.
It juggles you.
And if you're wondering what kind of parent in their right mind would allow their child to go on something like that, it turns out the president is too busy presiding? He's a deadbeat. That's what I'm getting at.
The president has more pressing business than to spend an entire Sunday in a theme park.
And because of that, his daughter is determined to get his attention.
Somebody's jammed the override.
Why, that little troublemaker.
I like how he low-key seems proud of her when, like, she could die. Like, this could actually be the end of your entire career and also someone's life, but mostly your career. Anyway, her father does not show up to save her, but I'm sure you can guess who does.
We're ready.
But this time, they're not the only spy kids who answer the call.
Gary and Gertie, what are they doing here?
So this is our first indication of the time that's passed since the first movie. Carmen and Junie may have been the first child labor hires to join the spy organization, but they weren't the last. Now they have some competition in the form of new sibling duo, Gary and Gertie Giggles. But not even they are good enough, apparently.
Take my hand. Back off. I want my father to come up here and get me.
At this point, I would just be like, you know what? It's in God's hands now. See you later, kid. Hopefully. Also, the new spy kids, Gary and Gertie, they are so annoying.
Stop what you're doing.
I can see you don't know what I'm talking about.
Like, I vividly remember watching this as a 5-year-old and thinking, you will never be Carmen and Junie. Anyway, the daughter has taken this device from her father's office, so Gary rescues that and Junie rescues her. And of course, the Secret Service agents, whose one job is to protect the president's daughter, care more about this device than they care about her. But yeah, overall, I actually like this opening scene quite a bit. It manages to do a lot of setup without info dumping. Like, we see that Gary and Gertie are being given better gadgets. We see that Carmen and Junie are fed up with the kind of missions they've been getting.
Promise me one thing. What? No more rinky-dink assignments.
And it seems like we're gearing up for some classic Spy Kids hijinks. So back at the Cortez's multi-million-dollar mansion, we see a couple subtle ways in which Carmen and Junie have grown since the last movie. Carmen is now some sort of super hacker.
You can't do that. There is no hacking in this household.
I know. Sorry.
Show me that again.
And Junie has become more confident. And he also has a pet robot bug named Ralph. And Ralph is just the sweetest thing in this entire movie. I like how normal bugs for me are just like, no, die. But robot bugs, I mean, look at his little leggies.
If anything happened to him, I would kill everyone in this room and then myself.
Anyway, the Cortez family is getting ready for a party where the OSS, that is the spy organization they all work for, is getting ready to name its new director. And the dad is up for the promotion. Now, at this party, we see that Carmen and Gary like each other for some reason.
You look great, Carmen. You want to dance?
Sure.
Even though Gary is just a complete jerk to Junie for the entire movie, right in front of Carmen.
You should have had that suit tailored, Junie. It's bunching up around your gut, and it makes your head look way too big.
I wish somebody would stand right in front of me and start talking crazy to my siblings. Like, don't piss me off. Only I am allowed to drag them. Anyway, the president of the United States shows up and gives a speech.
Gary and Gertie Giggles saved my daughter.
I saved her.
Also, the president in this movie is literally trash. Like, he admits openly that he finds that mysterious device to be more important than his own daughter.
More importantly, they safely retrieved the transmuker device.
You're gonna see that this movie suffers from a problem where, like, most people in it just kind of suck as human beings. Anyway, the president announces the new director of the OSS, but it turns out that it's not Carmen and Junie's dad.
Donegan Giggles.
Donegan is the agent they rescued in the last movie, and he's also Gary and Gertie's father. So let the nepotism begin.
I am proud to award them these Level 1 badges.
So now that they're level 1, Gary and Gertie get to go on the real assignments. The very ones that Carmen and Junie keep getting denied.
I wanted that assignment. This is so unfair.
But for now, there are more immediate problems to worry about, because it turns out that the champagne that all the adults have been drinking was laced with something.
Sleepers.
Which she can somehow tell just by touching it? ? So it turns out the waiters who served the champagne were evil, and now that all the grown-ups are out of the picture, the waiters are after the device that everyone keeps freaking out about. But not if the Spy Kids have anything to say about it. So we've got Tails over here, which is admittedly funny, but I think the movie is starting to get a bit shaky at this point. It's not clear why any of this matters. Like, in the first movie, we have to save mom and dad is a really clear goal. In fact, everyone's goal is clear. The bad guys want an unstoppable army to rule the world. The parents want to get back to spy work and save their colleagues. Floop wants to make a better children's show, etc. And all of these are set up really early on. But in Spy Kids 2, we don't know what's so different about these missions that Carmen wants to take on. What could be more important than saving the president's daughter? What does this device even do? Oh, okay, it does that. So the device that everyone is falling all over themselves to retrieve is something that can disable other electronic devices, also known as an EMP, also known as the most common spy device in any spy movie ever. Great. Anyway, despite the Spy Kids' best efforts, the bad guys escape with the device. And then the adults wake up and they pin this all on Junie. Yes, the adults who were incapacitated while their children were in mortal danger decide that since Junie dropped the device before the evil waiters picked it up, he should be kicked out of the OSS. Everybody sucks. Now, I actually have a fun fact about this next scene. We see the Spy Kids headquarters, but that is actually the San Antonio Central Library. And this library is sometimes used to host festivals and conventions, one of which I attended as a teenager and won first place in the art contest with Overwatch fan art, and I got a bunch of free art supplies. So there's your daily dose of obscure Spy Kids 2 adjacent D'Angelo Wallace lore. Anyway, the way everyone switched up on Junie in this movie is crazy. Have you ever been snaked by a friend and just for the clout they'll do it again? Also, how is this not an indication to the adults in this scenario that maybe employing literal children wasn't the best idea? Hey Reddit, am I the problem for involving 10-year-olds in matters of international security?
No. It's the children who are wrong.
But thankfully, Junie has someone in his corner.
Don't tell me you're hacking into... Already done. Level 2 status reinstated.
Honestly, if I was in Junie's position, I would have just been like, you know what? Keep it. Forget the OSS. All of you are fake. Nobody hit me up. But nah, Junie's back on board, and not only that, but he and Carmen are getting that fancy mission they wanted after all.
We're assigning ourselves to the Yukata assignment and programming a new destination for Gary and Gertie.
Then we get this lovely bit of blatant exposition.
What did we just do again? We're gonna get the transmitter device back so we can clear your name.
Machete shows up and gives the kids their new round of spy toys for this dangerous mission, including one gadget that is emphasized so heavily, it's obviously bound to come back up in the near future.
It's a rubber band.
Yeah, but it's also the world's greatest gadget. 999 uses.
But that's not the only cameo from the first film. We've also got fake Uncle Felix.
Not your uncle.
I know, it's just easier to call you that. You don't mind, do you?
Of course not.
As Uncle Felix is preparing their transportation for their fancy mission, Gary and Gertie show up, unknowingly headed to the new destination that Carmen and Junie have picked out for them. And listen, what happens in this scene is so sad that I decided at the age of 5, if I ever saw Gary Giggles in real life, it's on sight.
I accidentally squashed him. Sorry about that. He was outdated anyway.
He killed Ralph. 20 years ago, I told myself that I would never forgive this child for what he did, and 20 years later, I stand on business. I will be preying on this character's downfall for the remainder of this movie. I don't care how it makes me look. I don't care how it makes me sound. Gary Giggles is dead to me. So Carmen and Junie are off to retrieve the device, and Junie is heartbroken. He's like, Carmen, my brother in Christ, how can you in good conscience continue to support the person who killed my robot child? Not the robot children from the first movie, my robot bug child.
Gary's a bad guy, Carmen. Maybe I know that. I think I can change him.
Now, here's the thing about that. I've been making a lot of jokes in this video, but this is kind of important. It's commonly said that people can't change, but I do not think that's true. People can change and people do change. It happens all the time. But while people don't change may be false, the truth is you cannot change other people. Never in the history of ever have I seen someone successfully change another person for the better. I don't know who needs to hear this, but you cannot fix them. You cannot change them, and trying to do so will result in more heartbreak than any one person should ever have to go through. But also this movie is for middle schoolers, so forget about that and look at this obvious McDonald's product placement. That's even more shameless than the first movie. Anyway, the vehicle that Carmen and Junie are in stops working before they reach their destination because nobody ever gets to where they're going in Spy Kids. But yeah, the power goes out on the entire ship.
Rebreathers. Gotta do it by hand. What next?
Honestly, me. But as much fun as Carmen and Junie are not having, at least they're doing a little bit better than their rivals.
Gertie, where are we?
Here.
They've been sent to the middle of the Gobi Desert, where they land in a giant pile of camel poop. I like how one of the things that critics specifically appreciated about the first film was the fact that it did not have anybody rolling around in poop, and then that's exactly what happens in the second movie. Anyway, back at the OSS, Carmen and Junie's parents are alerted that their children are unaccounted for. But not to worry, because Donegan Giggles is on the case.
Let me go now and personally bring your children back.
That's not suspicious. That's not weird. But yeah, the parents are like, nah, it's good. We've got this. No distractions. Then they're immediately distracted because the mom's parents show up.
You guys told me you were coming next Tuesday. This is a very dangerous assignment and you have to wait here.
And for some reason, Carmen and Junie's grandparents are also baddies.
Is somebody gonna match my freak?
So Carmen and Junie ditch the defective vehicle and they travel to their location by foot. But as it turns out, there's something about this mysterious island that causes all electronic devices to fail.
None of our gadgets work. We have to use use our heads?
This whole movie is just me when the Wi-Fi router goes down for more than 3 minutes. Now, the evil waiters who stole the device at that party are on this island as well, and they seem to be doing just fine.
Somebody here has power. We need to find out who and for what.
And then Carmen and Junie jump into an active volcano. Just kidding.
We're floating!
It's a mini volcano. And then Steve Buscemi shows up and turns the mini volcano off. So the volcano is just one of many miniature experiments that Steve Buscemi's character Romero created.
I called it Romero's Zoo. Genetically miniaturized animals.
But he wasn't just miniaturizing these creatures, he was mixing them too, because that was bound to end well.
Horsefly, catfish, spider monkey, bullfrog.
Slizzards.
Cool.
Stay away from those.
And if that sounds like a recipe for a genetically altered disaster, just you wait.
And so I started to think, if only I could make them all a wee bit bigger.
He's kinda stupid. Like, I'm not sure what you thought was going to happen, but it was always going to be this. So now all the mutant mongrels have escaped, and Romero stays trapped inside the volcanic walls of his laboratory because he lives every day in constant fear that the creatures outside will exact revenge upon him for engineering the curse of their abominable existence, thus prompting what is by far the single most metal statement that has ever been uttered in a children's film in the history of cinema.
Do you think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he's created?
This is literally up there with lines like, "You cannot kill me in a way that matters," and "I will face God and walk backwards into hell," where I cannot believe the sheer power they contain somehow originated from a complete meme, like Tumblr or Twitter, or in this case, Spy Kids 2: The Island of Lost Dreams. What makes this line even funnier to me is that Steve Buscemi is God. This is literally the face I associate with God because he played him in a show called Miracle Workers. Anyway, now that I'm done reeling from that line, let's get back to the movie. So it turns out that Romero is the one who created the device. In fact, the one that everybody's been chasing after, the one that the evil waiters took back, is just a small recreation. The real device is somewhere here on the island. By shutting down all the surrounding electronics, Romero was attempting to stay off of people's radar. But clearly that wasn't working very well because now he has even more uninvited guests.
2 intruder children are being chased by a slizzard.
Gary and Gertie, leave them.
The way Junie was prepared to leave them to die is so real. A lot of people would be scared here, but I think he was real for that. But alas, they save Gary and Gertie anyway. Meanwhile, the mom and dad are tracking the kids down. But how is he tracking them down if there's no electricity and GPS doesn't work?
I installed a non-electrical tracking device in their teeth. My own invention.
Oh, okay. But while they're on the way to their kids, the parents realize they have a couple of stowaways.
We wanted to join you.
And we brought real food.
The grandparents have come to save the day too, because they are also spies, of course. But then Carmen and Junie yeet the teeth so they can't be tracked. See, the kids have figured out that the evil waiters from the party actually work for Donegan, who's trying to take them out and steal the device. And they don't want their parents getting targeted as well. But thankfully, the grandpa has backup trackers.
That charm necklace I sent you for Christmas. There he is.
So the kids, unaware that their parents are still on the way, make their way to the real device, fighting their way through so many of Romero's cursed creatures that the movie just turns into poorly animated beasts and where to find them. And the movie really falls off here for me personally. Like, there's an Indiana Jones pastiche that goes on for way too long. Junie and Gary have a bad CG off, which is probably the most poorly aged part of the whole movie. And there's just a bunch of things happening that don't really feel like they're bringing us any closer to our goal of stopping the bad guy from acquiring a piece of technology that he kind of already has. The movie just starts feeling like it's dragging, and overall I think the third act is just very weak, which is kind of sad because the setup itself wasn't really bad at all. Anyway, Carmen stands up to Gary finally, which I do appreciate.
I'm siding with you. Thanks.
And then they find the device, and they need to hold 3 switches together to stop it from destroying all the world's technology. And you'll never guess what winds up coming in handy. So yeah, they saved the world with a rubber band. Also, it turns out that Romero's creatures weren't trying to eat him after all, they were literally just trying to chill. It would be really funny though if they were all just like, chomp. Anyway, the parents and the grandparents show up, and it looks like they're just in time because they get ambushed by Donegan and his goons one final time. But now Donegan has backup, and it's the betrayal of the century.
Sorry, Gregorio.
Fake Uncle Felix steals the device back for Donegan. It really be your own people. I mean, not really, because he wasn't actually related to them, but still, trust no one.
Donegan said if I joined him, he wouldn't get rid of me like he's gonna do to you guys.
Everybody sucks. But thankfully, with the device being disabled, technology works again, so the Spy Kids win anyway. The bad guys get snatched up, and when Donegan tries to use the device on the Cortez family, it doesn't work. Turns out Gertie Giggles wasn't all bad after all, because she hacked the device last minute to stop it from causing any damage.
Just wait till Mom finds out you try to take over the world again.
The mutant creatures save the day, the device is destroyed, and then the president shows up, because of course he does, but he's a good dad now instead of a bad one, so it's okay. And then the president's daughter gives everyone the consequences they deserve.
You've been temporarily disavowed. You're fired. You are the new director of the OSS.
Junie also gets a reward, but he's like, nah, miss me with that.
Level 1. No thanks. I'm leaving the OSS.
Finally, driven to retirement at the ripe old age of 10. You hate to see it. Anyway, yeah. Movie over. And also Ralph is alive. Because again, it is a kid's movie. So this actually means I can forgive Gary, but I won't. Cue unnecessary musical number. How very fun. So as we've seen, Spy Kids 2 didn't hit quite as hard as the first one. I mean, in some ways it was still a pretty fun film, but there were a lot of areas where I feel like the magic was just well and truly lost. But one thing the film did not lose was money, because believe it or not, it was actually just as successful as the first one. Spy Kids 2 made $119 million, which again was absolutely crazy for 2002. Crossing that $100 million mark not just once, but twice was really starting to cement Spy Kids as one of the biggest kids movie franchises at the time. But what's even more interesting to me is that despite the success of the first film, the budget for the second one wasn't much higher than the first. Remember how he worked on literally everything for the sequel, from the music to the cinematography? Well, he did that for a reason. He wanted to keep the budget within reasonable limits by handling as much of the work as he could. And the fact that he managed to pull this off while maintaining the film's popularity is undeniably impressive. But unfortunately, while Spy Kids was able to continue its good fortune at the box office, staying in the viewers' good graces turned out to be another matter entirely. So let's take a trip to 2002 and see what the critics have to say about this one. Mission accomplished, yet again. So the Los Angeles Times were actually quite pleased with the movie, saying, though it is longer and more elaborate than it needs to be, it shares its predecessor's smart but relaxed sense of humor, a sophisticated imagination, and the ability to be sharp and playful without being malicious. While I do agree that there are many things the movie does manage to preserve from the first film, I'm just still sad about the things that it doesn't. Like, the depiction of the siblings in this movie didn't feel anywhere near as real or grounded as the first one. I know Carmen and Junie had already been introduced to the world, so we didn't need quite as much characterization, but I really just feel like this movie was like zoomed out compared to the first one in terms of emotional impact, and it left it feeling a little flat in my opinion. But the AV Club, which was actually part of The Onion back in 2002, had similarly high praise for the movie, calling it the rare sequel that magnifies the scope of the original without diminishing the fun. Once again, Rodriguez seems uniquely attuned to the sugar-addled mind of a 10-year-old boy, yet he fills out his vision with charmingly personal touches. I do think that this last line is pretty funny because I would say Spy Kids is actually unique because it's not trying to be a boys movie. I mean, first of all, the concept of things being for boys and for girls is a silly distinction in the first place, especially when it comes to something as universal as a family film, but a lot of things back then definitely did want to be for boys or girls, and I appreciate Spy Kids for not taking that approach. I really like the way Rodriguez wrote both main characters. In fact, if anything, I've always related way more to Carmen than Junie, even as a little kid, but part of that is because I'm the oldest sibling in my family, so I wound up having to match a lot of her energy for pretty much my whole childhood. Now, not all of the reviews were quite so glowing this time around. The Miami Herald gave the film a 2.5 out of 4 stars, and I actually think that out of all the reviews, I agree with this one the most. It points out that while many aspects did improve from one film to another, what's lacking is the simplicity that made the original, about a brother and sister who discovered their parents are secret agents, so much fun. I wouldn't say that Spy Kids 2 is a bad movie by any means, even if it is a bit tedious and meandering, but I think it's more than fair to say that it traded one kind of fun for another, and I greatly prefer the first film's approach. The same sentiment is echoed in the San Francisco Chronicle, who said that the movie lacks the inspiration of the original and has a bloated plot that stretches the running time about 10 minutes past a child's interest and an adult's patience. I agree that the pacing issues were by far the biggest thing to suffer this time around. Like, when this movie gets slow, it is slow, and I feel like a lot of this could have been avoided with some tighter script editing. But looking back at how the sequel was turned around only 1 year after the first movie, I can see why some aspects feel a little less thought out. Of course, while many of the reviews were balanced and found a lot of highs and lows, some were much less impressed, like our friends over at LA Weekly. The film is too loud, too frantic, and too derivative of everything from Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Mummy to The Island of Dr. Moreau. The story drags and labored exposition whenever there's not a chase or showy high-tech sequence. I'm actually sad to say I agree with the review. The word derivative narrative stands out to me because while I feel like the first Spy Kids movie did wear its influences on its sleeve, Spy Kids 2 is just a whole other deal. It's so close to the things that it's referencing, you may as well just watch the originals. Also, as far as negative reviews go, I do have to hand it to the Dallas Observer for the headline, "Why Kids?" They seem to enjoy the first movie, but that only left them all the more disappointed that the sequel failed to live up to its quality. And unfortunately for me, I found myself in the same rocket-powered boat. Now, we've taken a look at the sequel as a movie, but I want to take a second to dive back into the world of Spy Kids tie-in media. But this time, instead of boring things like books, we're going to talk about cool things like comic books. Though honestly, the word book is a massive stretch because the comics in question are only a couple pages each and they were never actually printed as standalones. Instead, they were included in magazines like Disney Adventures, the magazine for kids, which started in 1990 but was sadly discontinued in 2007, so Disney could better focus resources and maximize long-term growth potential through new magazine and book initiatives. Which, as a child at the time myself, I obviously understood and agreed that it was the correct decision. Now, tracking down copies of out-of-print books was enough of an ordeal on its own, but finding random issues of a now obscure children's magazine and somehow acquiring them in time to make this video kind of just sounded like a nightmare. I mean, even I have my limits. But clearly I haven't reached them yet because I did actually find the comics. So this is all thanks to the online archival efforts of one person, Sarah Spyborg259, also known as the sole contributor to the comic section of the Spy Kids fandom wiki page. Sarah's actually low-key a Spy Kids OG. Like, as a self-described Spy Kids nerd, she is locked in. I'm talking hundreds of posts, thousands of edits. She is truly doing the Lord's work, or my work in this case, which is basically the same thing. So since we've just finished watching Spy Kids 2, The Island of Lost Dreams, I say we start reading through the post-Spy Kids 2 comics, of which 3 out of 4 have been archived on the Spy Kids wiki. One of them seems to have been lost to time, but who knows. If anyone out there has a copy of Nightmare at 30,000 Feet from the May 2003 edition of Disney's Comic Magazine, now is the time to come forward. Anyway, the first comic we're looking at is from September 2002, and it's called Rodeo Ruckus. Sorry, I just get so excited when I see exclamation points. So looking at page 1, I have some thoughts. First of all, this is a nitpick, but this massive 3D logo that they pasted in the corner really just highlights how remarkably not 3D this artwork is. Like, the drawing itself isn't really that bad, but this coloring though, ouch. But this was definitely a product of its time. Like, I remember watching cartoons back when digital coloring was first starting to become the norm, and people were like, wow, we can make the brightest orange that has ever existed in the history of the world? Say less. By comparison, I think color palettes in kids' cartoons nowadays are like weirdly aesthetic for the most part. And I think to myself, man, these kids have no idea. Like, you don't know what suffering is until someone hits you with hex code FF0000. That's not even a hex code, that's just a hex. Like, this is just an optical curse. But anyway, the comic itself has less than 20 panels, so there's not really much to recap. The Spy Kids are at the rodeo, and the grandpa's like, watch out, kids. There's a bunch of bad guys here, but they're disguised as clowns. It's basically Twitter in real life. So Carmen and Junie approach the clowns, but then they get caught. But before we see what happens next, we actually get an ad for Lunchables nachos with color-changing nacho sauce. Because what could be more appealing than green cheese? So Carmen and Junie enter the bad guy's lab, and there they learn about his plan to destabilize the political power structure to allow a military coup by attacking the Capitol with a stampede of genetically altered bulls. Kamala Harris, what is your plan to stop this? But first, let's take a look at an ad for Lunchables Cracker Stackers, now with candy stampers. If there's one thing that I always thought my turkey slices were missing, it was a sick decal. Anyway, Carmen and Junie distract the bulls with a candy bar, and then Grandpa catches the bad guy, and the dad's like, no more clowning around, and then it's over. And if this all sort of seems like a thinly veiled ploy to get kids to look at ads for Lunchable Cracker Stackers and color-changing nachos, don't worry. Because there's also Lunchables Crispy Squares with color-changing frosting. The Spy Kids is just a merchandising device allegations are getting a little harder to beat here. So Rodeo Ruckus was a mere 6 pages long, but this next comic is actually only 4. And that might be for the best because it's pretty much exactly the same as the first one. Except this time, instead of bulls, there's alligators. So the April 2003 comic is called Face to Face with Fang! Exclamation point. Anyway, they once again assume control of the animal army, this time through the help of Machete's Gatorizer, which allows them to speak to alligators because what else would a Gatorizer do? And then they fly off on their Machete buddy packs and it's happily ever after. Until June 2003 when we get serialized. I'm trying something something new with the exclamation points. So at this point, the comic is literally 2 pages long and half of 1 page is just an ad, meaning 25% of this is just promoting Disney's other products. This one doesn't even have an antagonist. One of Machete's gadgets explodes and like, that's it. That's the plot. They weren't even trying at this point. Like they may as well have just printed the ad by itself and then slapped the Spy Kids 2 logo on top. But yeah, that's the world of Spy Kids 2 tie-in comics, now with color changing frosting. And look, I wasn't expecting like an Umbrella Academy level comic book experience, though that would actually be pretty fire. But I feel like there was definitely more potential for a Spy Kids comic than whatever this is. Like at least the books were actually books. The comics are just surface level entertainment facades that are truly meant to funnel literal children into purchasing an assortment of strange food items and proprietary products. So I guess Robert Rodriguez really was my Mr. Beast after all. Alright, let's talk about 3D, not CG, 3D. Nowadays, if you had to choose the definitive 3D film that came out in the 2000s, I think most people would rightfully say Avatar. Wait, not that one. Avatar. Wait, not that one. Avatar. Oh dear God, why? But we, my friends, are in 2003. The Blue People Avatar hasn't been released yet. James Cameron is mostly known for directing his other movie about water, and his other movie about water, and also his other movie about water. God, I just love Piranha 2: The Spawning. But yeah, in 2003, there was only one culture-defining three-dimensional event of the year, and it was obviously Spy Kids 3D Game Over. Though, speaking of James Cameron, did you know that he and Robert Rodriguez actually dropped a collab called Alita Battle Angel, which is a whole fever dream in and of itself? Like, does anybody remember this? But anyway, that was in 2019. This is 2003. Focus. Von Dutch, chunky highlights, Avril Lavigne, before the conspiracy that she was replaced by a clone. Now, the concept of 3D wasn't exactly new when Spy Kids 3 came out, as the technology itself has wavered in and out of style for basically as long as movies have existed. But it was still a relatively rare occurrence, leading to fun threads from 20-year-old forums like, what kind of 3D glasses should I buy to watch the new Spy Kids? The answer, by the way, is those awful red and blue ones, because Spy Kids was released in anaglyphic 3D, which I don't know about you, but for me, it's just headache central. In fact, I'm pretty sure Spy Kids 3D was the last movie I ever watched with the red and blue glasses, because I got such a bad migraine afterwards that I actually physically died. I was 5, so I may have been exaggerating, but the point remains. But 3D wasn't the only technology that Spy Kids 3 was unique for using. It was shot entirely with digital cameras instead of film, which is pretty much the norm nowadays, but was a huge deal back then. Another new tech it embraced was CGI, with over 90% of the movie being shot on green screen, with CG environments added in post. And even the premise of the film represents yet another tech topic that was taking off. Video games were kind of having a moment. Like the early 2000s was a bit of a gaming golden age. The PlayStation 2, Game Boy Advance, Xbox, and GameCube, they all came out back to back in the 3-year span between the year 2000 and Spy Kids 3's release. These consoles were selling millions of units, and one of those units was mine. The very next year after I watched Spy Kids is when I was given not just a Game Boy Advance SP, but a copy of SpongeBob SquarePants the movie, the video game, and The Incredibles Rise of the Underminer. Not to flex, but yes, I am somewhat of a video game veteran. So imagine how hype I was when it was revealed that the third Spy Kids movie would take place in a video game. It was literally the coolest thing since sliced bread, which is not particularly cool. Like, I feel like there are so many foods that go harder than bread. But once again, Spy Kids managed to be a perfect time capsule of both everything that was going right and everything that was going horribly wrong simultaneously. And trust me, a lot of this was about to go horribly wrong. The whole film is like one big tech demo, but the tech in question left a lot to be desired. Shot on a now 20-year-old digital camera, released in headache-inducing 3D, and rendered chock full of low-poly game-inspired CGI that was sure to age really, really well, this movie's fate was sealed from the start, and it was bound to wind up looking very bad very fast, no matter how cutting edge it was at the time. But nightmare fuel aside, it's too late to turn back now, so put on your red and blue glasses because we're about to watch Spy Kids 3D Game Over. The movie opens by reminding us that one of the Spy Kids is no longer a spy.
I'm an ex-secret agent. My name is Junie Cortez.
As you're gonna see, for a movie with spy in the title, Spy Kids 3D devotes a shockingly small amount of time to actual spy-related activities. Anyway, Junie has found his new calling as a private investigator, and the first client he helps is none other than Selena Gomez in one of her first on-screen roles.
I know why the water from your park is missing.
Pray tell.
They shut down the park during the winter.
As you can see, Junie's new line of work isn't quite as exciting as his previous position.
From saving cats and trees to finding lost toys.
And it's not like he can't go back to spy work, but he's just kind of over it, no matter how many times the OSS calls and begs him to rejoin.
I'm no longer an agent. I can't
help you. Whatever it is, it's your problem.
Besides, Junie already has a mission of his own. He's saving every penny he earns from these assorted PI tasks. That way he can attempt to purchase the movie's inciting incident.
The biggest virtual reality game in history. Goes online at midnight.
But then he fumbles the bag. Like, he literally fumbles the bag, and you hate to see it. Another thing you hate to see is the acting in this movie, because oh my god, what happened? Like, look, it was getting kind of shaky in the second film, but I think it can be ignored for the most part. But this movie has so little going on that most of the time, the acting is all I can think about.
Don't hold on to the past, Junie. Look at me. 9 years old and nowhere to go but up.
It kinda hurts. And it's not even just these kids' fault either. The script writing on this movie is just... You'd have to have like Denzel Washington levels of talent to deliver lines like this convincingly.
It's good to take care of your family, but remember one thing. Everyone's your family.
I was going to say that makes no sense, but the kids got it covered.
That makes no sense.
So after that incredibly vague theme is stated, Junie finally finds himself unable to refuse the call to adventure.
Your sister's missing.
Thank you, George Clooney. So we finally head to the OSS where we immediately run into Donegan Giggles, but don't worry. Turns out Gertie did tell her mom that dad was trying to take over the world again, so the mom is keeping him in check.
Mrs. Giggles must have straightened you out.
I certainly did.
Thank you, Salma Hayek. Also, I feel like the dialogue here is not appropriate to have in front of Junie.
She, worked me over pretty good, actually.
Darling, behave.
She worked you over pretty good? Surely there were other ways of wording this. I feel like adult jokes in kids' movies can work, but maybe not when the joke is directed towards an actual kid. Anyway, you know the game Junie was saving up for? Well, it turns out it's a trap.
Once you get through the game, your mind belongs to the toy maker.
The inventor of the game.
And guess who's already been trapped?
Carmen! Her mind's still in the game. She got as far as level 4, then nothing.
So Carmen entered the game to try to shut it down with her super hacker powers, but nobody's heard from her since. And wouldn't you believe that the OSS is still trying to pin this on Junie?
Her first and only choice wouldn't answer our call.
So she decided to go alone.
I'm just gonna say it. The OSS is trash. When I was a kid, I actually thought they were cool. I was like, yeah, I'm totally going to be a spy when I grow up. But now I realize that the OSS is literally just a bunch of adults using child labor in dangerous situations and then scapegoating the children to avoid taking responsibility anytime anything goes slightly wrong. And they get away with it because the organization is secret, aka above the law and exempt from the consequences of its own actions. But again, this movie is for actual middle schoolers, so forget about all that and look at these fancy video game graphics. Oh, that's not... No. So we're inside the game and the graphics are just oof. I feel like I need a moment of silence for my eyes.
Pogo toads!
There should be repercussions for making something look this bad. Like if a film like Finding Nemo could come out in 2003, what is the excuse? Shrek came out in 2001. Anyway, back to the mission. Junie has to find a way to save Carmen and then shut down the game before it goes live in 12 hours. But time isn't the only thing running out. After sustaining a fall, he basically loses one of his aura points, and if he hits 0...
Game over. No replays, no restarts.
Oh, and also when he fell, he apparently passed out for multiple hours, so now he's down to 4.5 hours instead of 12.
What happened to my 12 hours?
Time flies when you're playing games.
So Junie asks around for guidance on how to get to the supposedly unwinnable level 5 so he can reach the toy maker, and these beta testers who have been playing the game for a while give him a shortcut to level 2.
Level 2's on the dark side of the moon. Only way to get there is by hitting that target and bouncing to it.
But it turns out that the beta testers were ops.
Won't be seeing him anymore. Let's go.
So they basically gave Junie the runaround, and now he's down another aura point. Our boy is not doing well, so the OSS is like, you know what? We got you. Pick one person from the outside world, and we'll send them in to help you. And Junie picks Grandpa.
Pros, superior intellect. Cons, physically disabled.
Cons, physically disabled, is crazy, but maybe not as crazy as Junie's explanation for picking him.
His energy force would have doubled back, making his arms, his heart twice as strong as a normal person.
Something tells me that that's not how any of this works, but if somebody with more insight is willing to illuminate me on this, please, for the love of God, do so. Also, Junie loses another hour for literally no reason, and I do not understand how time works in this movie, and at this point, I don't think the movie does either. Anyway, the grandpa shows up and he's like, hey, yo, we're going after the toy maker? Say less.
I've been hunting him down for 30 years, Junie.
Then he gets a power-up that allows him to walk, and he runs off to chase a butterfly, and that's pretty much the last of his meaningful screen time, for some reason.
I'll catch up with you.
But we have to find...
Carmen.
Then Junie goes and participates in a robot cage match against this girl for some reason, and they fight in the most impractical mech suits I have ever seen. The girl, Demetra, mops the floor with him, meaning Junie loses even more aura points, but then he turns it around and wins in the end. And why did this happen? I have no idea, but we are only getting started. So the toy maker in this movie is played by Sylvester Stallone, who won a Razzie Award for Worst Supporting Actor, specifically for this role that he's playing in Spy Kids 3D. And if you're like, wait, that seems kind of harsh, well, just see for yourself.
Who are you people? We are you.
He just seems lost. My thoughts exactly. So Junie stands in front of a billboard, and then the beta testers think he's the guy from the billboard. And then they all proceed to say the guy more times than any one movie has the right to.
You're the guy from the poster. That guy, the guy.
The
I'm not the guy.
So in order to prove whether or not he is the guy, we have to sit through a 6-minute racing scene. And this time for our shameless product placement, instead of Mickey D's, we get AMD because they make computer parts, and this time we're gamers. Anyway, Junie wins the race, so the beta testers believe he really is the guy. So they join his party along with a familiar face.
I hear you're the guy.
I am definitely the guy.
Dear God. But hey, Grandpa's back. So now that we've got a full party, obviously the first thing we want to do is immediately split up. But then Grandpa saves the crew from Reddit moderators, I guess. And the movie has this really rough jump cut. This next clip is completely unedited.
What's he gonna do? Drool on us?
How did that make it into the final cut? Anyway, then they reveal that the Reddit mods are secretly Reddit mods, and I don't know, man. This movie's quality is dropping off faster than Junie's aura points. Speaking of which, he's down to like 4 now, but thankfully he finds a way to fix it.
He found a life pack. What?
That's rare.
And then instead of fixing it, he immediately gives it away to the girl he just met. You ever feel like a movie is making fun of you for watching it? So one member of Junie's party, Arnold, has said like less than 10 words so far in this entire movie. But he opens up to Junie about his reason for joining the game.
I'm here for the great prize behind level 5. It'll save my family from poverty.
And then the toy maker forces Arnold and Junie to fight for their lives in a one-on-one battle against each other. Junie's like, nah, I'm just gonna dip. And Arnold's like, nah, you're just gonna die. And he beats him within an inch of his life. And then Arnold's like, oh, you still have a little life? I'm about to end it like a Hanya Yanagihara novel. But right before keeping it real goes wrong, Demetra, the girl Junie likes, taps in and takes his place in the fight. And Arnold's like, then perish. And he takes her out with no hesitation whatsoever. And that's that on that.
Demetra, game over.
This part of the movie is wild. Like, Arnold even tries to play it off after the fact.
Sorry, Junie. My family.
And you know, I don't blame Arnold for this. It's not a Sword Art Online scenario where you die in real life if you die in the game. But I just find it absurd how out of nowhere this entire sequence was. But yeah, rip Demetra, I guess.
On with the game. Level 4.
So level 4 is where the OSS lost track of Carmen. It's time for Junie to go through the toughest trial he's faced yet to save his, oh, never mind, she's right over there. And of course, instead of a heartfelt reunion, Carmen just shares some good old-fashioned exposition.
The toy maker's the guy who put Grandpa in the wheelchair 30 years ago.
Having Carmen not show up until 50 minutes into the movie was definitely a choice. She's 50% of the Spy Kids, but she's barely in the Spy Kids 3 movie. And there's 0% spying happening here. Like, at least the first 2 films tried to be spy movies, but this one's just trying to be Tron in 360p. Anyway, thankfully, there's only one more area to cross.
Every video game has lava in it.
There's no lava in Halo. In Metroid, it's molten magma.
So after that highly relevant bit of gaming trivia, we go lava surfing, get hit by a lava monster, and then we fall into the lava, and then it's actually not lava, and then we finally make it to level 5. But instead of focusing on the objective that it's been meandering towards for the past hour, the movie instead introduces some more last-minute lore. Turns out that not only is there the guy, but there's also the deceiver.
Someone who misleads you down a path where no one will survive. I think Junie's the deceiver.
This is probably the realest part of the whole movie though, because the same people who blindly follow someone are the exact kind of people to just turn on someone arbitrarily. Now, Junie is obviously not the deceiver, but he's also not the guy. So that does raise the question, who is?
I am. I'm the guy.
Thanks, Elijah Wood. Anyway, Elijah Wood has 1 minute and 35 seconds of screen time because he dies immediately after appearing.
Oops.
This is what I meant by a movie making fun of you for watching it. But you lose some, you win some, because look who's back from the dead. Just kidding, she was never actually alive in the first place.
She's the reason this level's unwinnable. She's the deceiver.
I feel like this all would have made so much more sense if they had introduced the concept of the deceiver at any point within the first hour of the movie, but this whole thing has just been making itself up as it goes along.
Sorry, Junie, but it's in my programming.
But then the toy maker attacks so he can keep them in the game forever, and Demetra actually traps herself inside with the monsters to save everyone, so I guess her programming wasn't quite as evil as she implied. But yeah, rip Demetra for real this time, bye! Anyway, everyone finally gets to leave, but not before the movie tries to make some sort of poignant commentary on wheelchair users.
Even though I'll be in a wheelchair, on the inside I feel like this.
And now everyone's back to real life, and Junie can finally see what his party members actually look like.
In the real world, I'm not that smart.
I'm not strong.
I'm not cool.
I have the opposite problem where I'm somehow even cooler in real life than on the internet, so in a way I do relate to this. And then everyone lived happily ever after, except for one small problem. While shutting down the game, the grandpa also released the toy maker into the world, so now there's kind of a whole thing going on outside. And who will save the day? How about literally everyone who has ever played any significant part in the history of the Spy Kids franchise? I feel like I'm watching Ready Player Zero. But you know what really saves the day in the end? The power of forgiveness.
I've only been searching for you so I could tell you that I forgive you.
He kidnapped your granddaughter. But you know what? I want this movie to end so badly, I'm not even gonna press the issue. Sylvester Stallone gets to deliver one final terrible line as he shuts down his giant murder robot, and then we're finally free.
Game over.
Just kidding, that's not his final line. The real one is actually worse.
It's not whether you win or lose. It's how you play the game.
Great. Cue the awful ending theme. Behold, a movie so bad that the actors could tell it was going to be a mess even as they were filming it.
That might be the end of my career right there.
What fun. All right, so there's no two ways about it. Spy Kids 3 did not need to happen. There's obviously a lot that I can applaud in terms of technical innovation and yada yada yada, but the truth of the matter is this movie is just not good. My review really boils down to a single question. Why though? Why kids indeed? It's not even like the first film was an open-ended story. The second film doesn't add anything to the world of Spy Kids, but I'd actually argue that the third film takes away from the franchise by leaving a big CGI stain on what would have otherwise been a fondly remembered title. But I guess if I really think about it, I already know the answer to why they made the movie. In fact, I can think of over 100 million answers. As we've seen with the second film, worse quality does not always translate to worse box office performance. So could the final film in this trilogy pull off a cinematic hat trick and keep the box office success going? Well, as it turns out, Spy Kids 3 would not match the heights of the first two films. It would completely demolish them. This film was massive, with Spy Kids 3 making nearly $200 million in theaters. $197 million would be considered a success today, let alone in 2003. So the third film makes it undeniable that the Spy Kids trilogy was officially a smash hit. But even as it solidified the franchise as one of the most unlikely success stories from a financial perspective, this third movie also doomed the Spy Kids name to being critically panned for the rest of time. Like to this day, the majority of people discussing Spy Kids 3 talk about how poorly it aged and the way it epitomizes all the worst technical trends of the time. But make no mistake, even back then, people knew that this film was not going to age well. Here's a look at what people were saying back in 2003. Now, before we get into the serious reviews, I do have to point out this one site called Film Threat actually gave the movie 5 out of 5, which I wish I could have watched whatever they watched because something is not adding up. You know what? I just have to read you this review. It's so funny. Unlike the somber pretentiousness that wears down other films with youth appeal, like Star Wars The Phantom Menace, The Hulk, Matrix Reloaded, and X-Men 2, Spy Kids 3 feels like something a kid would make. Ah yes, my favorite kids movie, The Matrix Reloaded. My parents saw that R rating and they were like, all right son, knock yourself out. I can't imagine why Spy Kids 3 feels more child-friendly than a movie whose opening scene features all of the characters getting down and dirty in a cave. It looks, sounds, and breathes like a grade school tyke out for a weekend video game binge at GameWorks. There are no boring expository sequences, no depressing grown-up politics. I think the main issue is that there's nothing here for grown-ups at all. Something that has appeal across a wide range of ages doesn't automatically equal boring or depressing. And the fact that this movie does feel like something that would only appeal to a grade schooler is probably its biggest problem. But that wasn't the only positive review. Spy Kids 3D inspires with its dimensions. Man, I just love dimensions. X or Y? Don't get me started on Z. Anyway, this review mostly focuses its praise on the 3D elements of the film, which I do have to admit were visually striking. It's just a shame that the striking in question felt like being hit over the head with a shiny 3-dimensional crowbar. And honestly, even if the visual effects did look good, that still would not be enough for me to call this a good movie. In my opinion, a good film can shine through bad VFX, but good VFX have never saved a bad movie. And speaking of the effects, many critics were not nearly as impressed. Better bring some aspirin, says the Globe and Mail. While there's a certain rough charm to the handmade virtual reality world Rodriguez creates, the movie still has the undeniable drawback that it causes a headache. I think even without the painful anaglyphic 3D effects, the CGI on its own was enough to give the movie an immensely unpleasant visual edge, with the garish color palettes and lackluster designs making this one of the most painful to look at movies of the era. In Variety's review, they got kind of existential with it, saying it feels almost like something family and friends threw together for their own amusement. It's hard to dislike a movie this lighthearted, but there's something terribly ephemeral about it as well. It's a film of complete weightlessness. I'll have whatever Variety was having when they wrote this article, because I promise you, it was never that deep. I do agree with the idea that this film does have like a group of friends feeling to it. It's like something you would have made for a school project and then never watched again. So I guess it kind of is ephemeral if you look at it that way. That last scene in particular, where everyone from every movie shows up, just felt so forced and like such a blatant attempt to give everyone some screen time, even if it made no sense whatsoever for them to be on screen. Maybe this movie should have stayed in the drafts. As you can see, not everyone was outright trashing the movie, but the general tone was clearly a lot more negative than the first two. The Dallas Observer said that Spy Kids 3D signified the milking to death of a franchise, and that the charm of the 2001 original has been decimated, its heart replaced with a microprocessor. As harsh as that sounds, I feel the exact same way. Like, I didn't agree with critics who claim that the first movie was utterly devoid of charm, and while I did agree that the second movie lost a lot of that charm, I still wouldn't consider it to be completely without heart. But Spy Kids 3D, I absolutely believe that the only deciding factor in its creation was money. And Spy Kids 1 showed that financial success and a genuinely good story don't have to be mutually exclusive. So it's just really sad to see the Spy Kids franchise devolve into every negative thing that its detractors accused it of being with the first movie. But I think that out of all the reviews I looked at, the most disheartening one comes from none other than Roger Ebert himself. As we saw with the first movie, Ebert was the guy when it came to movie reviews. He was what the culture feeling, to put it simply. So the fact that he gave the last one 1.5 stars out of 4 was not a good sign. After making the splendid Spy Kids and the lesser but still entertaining Spy Kids 2 Island of Lost Dreams, Robert Rodriguez has somehow misplaced his energy, his flair, and his humor in this third film, which is a flat and dreary disappointment. It's so sad to see the same person who called Spy Kids a treasure go on to give the franchise basically the final nail in its coffin. And I feel that same disappointment. I think that at this point, we're familiar enough with the style to say that Spy Kids 3D does feel like a Robert Rodriguez film through and through. But unfortunately, it feels like Rodriguez on autopilot, like an AI-generated approximation that left all of his telltale quirks feeling less like a signature flair and more like a cheap gimmick. The Spy Kids franchise had officially won the box office, but lost the plot. So we've taken a look at the Spy Kids novels, which were not as bad as you might expect, and we've gone over the Spy Kids comics, which were exactly as bad as you might expect. But now it's time to take our Spy Kids tie-ins to the next level, literally. Behold the Spy Kids 3D Game Over CD-ROM. This game was released for PC and Mac in 2003, and I had to have it. What better way to immerse yourself in the Spy Kids 3D experience than to enter a video game of my own? So I found a copy of the CD-ROM for sale, but then that's when it hit me. I haven't seen an optical disc drive in years. Like, you know those slots that you put the CD in? Yeah, no, my computer doesn't have one, my car doesn't have one, none of my game consoles. Like, I feel like there was a time when everything had a disc drive, but now it's just like, good luck inserting that disc you speak of. If someone hands me like the secret to end global warming, but the information is contained on the CD, guess I'll die, because that should have been an email. But yeah, Spy Kids 3D Game Over for CD-ROM was sadly out of the question. Also, just from looking at videos of the game on YouTube, it doesn't really seem like I was missing much anyway. But I wasn't ready to give up on my video game dreams just yet. Remember how I said that the year after Spy Kids 3D is when I entered my gamer era? Well, what if I told you that even now, I still have that Game Boy Advance SP, and what if I told you that my Game Boy still worked like a charm even to this day? Also, if you're not using it, it holds a charge for years at a time, which is just crazy. The Game Boy Advance was really that console. Like, how many letters in Nintendo? 8, because that's exactly what they did. But if you're wondering how any of this helps us, just you wait. So I managed to get my hands on a copy of Spy Kids 3D Game Over for the Game Boy Advance, which is a completely different game from the computer version, despite having the same title. And I booted it up and was surprised to find that it worked perfectly. I was zipping through the levels, living my Spy Kids 3D life. We had our life packs, robot fights, lava surfing. Like, this game really makes you feel like a Spy Kid. But then something happened, or rather, it stopped happening. At the beginning of the final world, my game just froze. So I restarted it, and this time I couldn't get past the level select screen. I restarted it a second time, and then I couldn't even get past the title screen. So I said, you know what? Third time's a charm. And that's when my Game Boy sacrificed itself to Bill Cipher. So yeah, it turns out the game over part was a prophecy, because after 20 years, Spy Kids 3D killed my Game Boy. Can we get an F in the chat? I think this calls for a Game Boy funeral, which would actually be a really good band name until Nintendo sues you for everything you're worth. But yeah, I guess I'll just bury this bad boy right between my Tamagotchi and the 2001 United States economy. But now what? My computer can't run the computer game, and my Game Boy can't run the Game Boy game. But what if the Game Boy game could run on my computer? Would something like that even be possible? I ask, slowly zooming in on my face to build anticipation. Yes. Turns out the answer is yes. All right, let's go. Disney, Nintendo, two companies that will both jump at the chance to sue me for emulating this game. So the first thing that stood out to me was the overall atmosphere. The art still looks pretty nice, all things considered, and the music is just a straight up bop. Someone needs to sample this. Unfortunately though, that's pretty much where the nice things I have to say about this game end. Everything else that stood out to me was a problem. Either I am very bad at playing this game, which is obviously not possible, or the controls are just kind of jank. Jank was an understatement. The controls were just awful, hard to maneuver, totally inconsistent. It was a nightmare. Another huge problem with the game is that it's not really clear what the point of anything is. I mean, in that way, it's exactly like the third movie. Like, they vaguely say rescue Carmen, but everything else is kind of just left to the imagination. So I started filling in my own details. I got a Grammy? No, I think that was an Oscar. It's another Oscar. So I now see the point of this game is to capture all the Oscars that the Spy Kids 3 cast did not win, but clearly should have. And if janky and pointless weren't harsh enough, you can add unoriginal to the list as well. I do love how all of these enemies are just like blatant ripoffs of Mario. But regardless, I really did try to just lock in and have fun, but the game would not let me. Is that Gary? Can I kick him in the face? Aw. The game tried to spice things up with power-ups, but they were all so mid. You've gained a new ability, super jump. So that's a super jump, and that's a normal jump. I'm gonna be honest, I feel like I got ripped off. There's a rod power-up, like the one Junie uses in the game when he's fighting for his life against Arnold, and at one point, it went right through an enemy without even hitting them. Here. What? After a certain point, I couldn't even force myself to have fun. I'm literally like just holding the button. I'm not really contributing any input here. Not even the robot fights were enough to add some excitement. They just felt like arguing with a brick wall until it falls down. Well, that was fun. So again, they tried to spice up the robot fights with power-ups, but this time, they are actually too effective to the point where they trivialize all the following encounters. I could just have a never-ending stream of horrifying death saws. I got so bored that I just started doing weird things just to see what would happen because there were no repercussions for anything. Whoa! That's a representation of how every time I log on to X, I want to jump off a cliff as well. And look, I know the game is old, but I've played far older games that go a lot harder than this. I don't know if this is cheating, but I seriously can't be bothered to play the game normally anymore. If I was a kid playing this, I feel like I would just be bored out of my mind. But hey, at least you can surf on lava. This must be the lava board. Whoa, why is he making that face? Until of course you get ejected from your board for no reason. What? And then respawn back on the lava. Bruh. So yeah, I kind of just gave up and watched the rest on YouTube. Well, I mean, it looks like I was almost done, so that's a plus. The ending turned out to be just as tepid as the rest of the game. Like, imagine if I had brute forced my way all the way to the final boss just for this. Congratulations, Junie. You have defeated the Toymaker's robot and beat the unwinnable level. You are definitely the guy. And seeing as it took the person in question 30 minutes to beat the game, and I'm pretty sure I was going to wind up finishing in about 90 minutes, I can't imagine that this would have been worth the money even back in 2003. But no matter how much I disliked the game, at least I had a somewhat better time than this person. This game has absolutely everything I hate about GBA platformers rolled into one. Cheap deaths, unavoidable hits, lousy controls, and unsatisfactory level design. Almost all of your power-ups are worthless trash that fills up your inventory. I think only the super jump is worthwhile. The racing sections are a bag of... They kind of get lost in the sauce there, but they actually wound up bringing up a really good point. You don't even get to see Carmen once you beat the game, and she's the entire reason Junie began this mission. Wait, that's a good point though. Why don't you get to see Carmen? The game is literally pointless. Like, the only objective they give you, find Carmen, doesn't even happen. So truly, what was the point? I think ultimately I have to agree with that angry commenter. Ugh, I never ever want to play this again. If I got this game as a kid, I would have been crushed. Nobody asked plus L plus ratio. And on that poignant note, I think we can end our Spy Kids journey here once and for all. Also, I'm aware that there are 2 other movies and an animated TV series, but at the same time, no, there's not. Well, that was my Spy Kids video. I had a bunch of fun making it, which is kind of a big deal because if I could just get kind of real for a second, the internet has not been fun for me lately. Like, I'm having fun here on my channel, but every time I go outside of it, it's like, oh dear God, what have I done? And everyone I talk to lately says the exact same thing. There's just so much going on from so many different directions that it kind of does feel like Pandora's box. And you can't just close it because many of these overlapping conversations are important. And in the past, I found that my mental health really takes a hit when the bad things are all I can focus on. But nowadays, I have a bunch of strategies for dealing with this, and one of them is remembering that lighthearted videos like this one are also very important. So if you're wondering why I did put so much work into such a lighthearted video, it's because I take it seriously. If I manage to make you laugh or have a good time or even just mildly amuse you for an hour and a half, I take that just as seriously as my ability to inform people or call things out or have those heavy conversations. There's a time for the heavy conversations and there's a time to recharge between them with things that make you feel better. The internet is a big place and we don't have to devote all of it to bad people doing bad things. So it was immensely refreshing to focus my time and energy on someone like Robert Rodriguez, whose biggest crime was making a few silly movies, while simultaneously fighting for representation in his films, involving his family in his projects, and inspiring people like me to do the things I'm doing even to this day. I guess what I'm trying to say here is this video made me feel quite a bit better, and I really hope it did the same for you. And if it does, let me know. I have all kinds of things like this that I can make videos on. I just pulled Spy Kids out of a hat because I thought it would be fun. And you know what? It absolutely was. But yeah, sorry the video is over. I know you wanted to watch it till the end of time because it's like the most fun you've ever had in your entire life or whatever, but don't worry. I'll upload another one soon enough. Or never. Guess you got to subscribe to find out which one's which. Okay, thanks, bye!